Sometimes darkness has its hour, and there is nothing we can do to stop it. In the midst of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, students began to raise their voices against the injustices that were happening to the African American community. And so one of the things they did is they held sit-ins at lunch counters at businesses like Woolworths and other such places. And they did this because at the time, African Americans were not allowed to sit at the counters and be served. And so these students would come and they would sit and they would read or study or write papers. And they knew that this was very, frankly, dangerous. They knew that they could be beaten, taunted, arrested, and in fact, all of those things did happen. We can go to YouTube and watch the horrendousness of how they were treated. And what's remarkable about these young people is that they refused to give back in kind. So when they were met with violence, they didn't strike back with violence. When they were shown hatred, they didn't strike back and show hatred. Instead, they remained peaceful. They held their heads high with dignity, even though they were taunted and physically they were being beaten, they were being hit. So in those moments, we could say darkness had its hour. And there was nothing that they could do to stop it at that time. They couldn't stop people from being hateful and from the actions that they were doing. But these young people were not passive, and they did resist in a deeper way by, as I said, refusing to give back in kind, refusing to give back violence for violence. And instead of transmitting hatred, what did they do? They transformed it. They showed peace. They showed love. And they showed, really, our country another way, a way that was Christ-like. As we reflect and commemorate Christ's great moment of darkness this Holy Week, right? His suffering, his passion, his death, I'd like to draw our attention to another figure who showed us another way, like these young people. And that figure is Mary. Mary standing under the cross. She's a real model of discipleship for us. She really gets it right. And what does she do? Or rather, what does she not do? She doesn't speak. She doesn't try to stop what's going on, and she doesn't protest its unfairness, which may be kind of surprising when we stop and think about it. She's not there lying prostrate on the ground, protesting. Rather, she stood, the scriptures say, under the cross, which is a position of strength. And she's standing there when all of this horrendousness is happening around her. And she holds the tension. She stands in strength, and she refuses to give back in kind. And so like these young people, she's resisting in a deeper way. Mary, she couldn't stop the crucifixion. It was going to happen. But she could stop some of the hatred and the bitterness and the jealousy and the anger, the heartlessness, all of it that caused it and surrounded it. And she really radiated instead everything that was antithetical to the crucifixion. She radiated gentleness, understanding, forgiveness, peace, light, all of these things. Father Ron Rolheiser, a great spiritual teacher and author, he says this. He says, there are times when things have gone so far that shouts and protests are no longer helpful. Darkness is going to have its hour, and all we can do is stand under the cross and help eat its bitterness by refusing to participate in its energy. We can say, I can't stop this injustice, but I will not conduct its hatred. And that is not despair. There's a lot of darkness and hatred and bitterness and bigotry and downright meanness, really, in our culture today, in this country, that is toxic for all of us. All we have to do is go online or turn on the TV, and we see the ways that we are disparaging one another. People who don't share our views. We tear them down at any cost to, quote, kind of win an argument. And when we do this, when we demean people, when we dehumanize them, we're all losing, right? Nobody is winning when we're doing this. And as I've reflected on this and the Passion this weekend and Mary's role, I was thinking about how the breach of the Capitol and the rioting that we saw happen on January 6th. This wasn't something that just happened one day. People got up and decided, I'm going to storm the Capitol. No, that's not what happened. It was really a culmination of years of demonizing one another, of building mistrust online, and through public figures and through our communities and even seeping into our families. And what has happened? What has that shown us? It's shown us that words really do matter. The way that we treat each other matters. And when we don't treat one another in a loving way, it can lead to really terrible actions like those that we saw at the Capitol on January 6th. There are times in our life when darkness is going to have its hour. So whether that's when people, they say something behind your back that's hurtful or untrue, when people come after you, attack you online, when you're treated unjustly or unfairly at work, or maybe, when someone you love really wrongs you or hurts you. These things happen in our life. But we all have a choice in how we can respond, right? And so the question is, how will we respond? Will we add toxicity and anger and bitterness and just meanness to our world when we are wronged? Or will we respond like Mary and those brave students in the civil rights movement by refusing to give back in kind? Let's take some time to pray and reflect and to sit with these questions. During these holiest of days, I pray that when you are surrounded by darkness you cannot stop, you are given the strength to respond as Mary did, with dignity, grace, and love. Have a blessed Holy Week and a wonderful and very happy Easter.